The following is a presentation of the Chicago Bears Network and ChicagoBears.com. Download the Chicago Bears official mobile app for up-to-the-minute Bears content every day. And now, welcome to Bears All Access, your all-access pass into Chicago Bears football. Bears All Access is brought to you by IGS Energy and sponsored by Athletico Physical Therapy and CDW.
With you once again, everybody. Another week of Bears All Access. I'm Jeff Joniak, along with broadcast partner Tom Thayer from News Radio 105.9 WBBM. And coming up shortly, joined by Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio's Moving the Chains. He's down in Mobile, Alabama, working the Senior Bowl practices day 2 today. And now we'll hear some snippets from this week's introductory news conferences, introducing head coach Matt Eberflus and general manager Ryan Poles. We'll get to the news of the day as well, but welcome in Tom Thayer. Tom, how you doing this week? Grasping all the details of what was said at the podium and the news conference early in the week, and then the slow process. Maybe not so slow process, because they're making some hay and filling out those coaching assignments, and that's a big part of this right now.
You know, initially, you listen to the statements they make up at the podium, how they introduce themselves to the media, the general public of the Chicago Bears fans, and you and I. And you kind of take in what they have to say, a little bit about the process of how they went about getting the job, everything they've done up until this point. And then you start reading in the backgrounds of some of the teams that they worked with, and you think about some of the teams that the experiences they gained from there. And then all of a sudden you start reading about the assistant coaches that are being hired, the years of experience they have, the relationships they've already been able to develop, because you need some of those obstacles already taken care of. You know, Matt Eberflus doesn't need to walk into a building and introduce himself to every single one of his assistant coaches. I think when you try to put a plan in place and you've already, rubbed elbows in some of the most difficult experiences of your coaching life with some of these guys, I think it's ultimately beneficial to what you're going to try to build here.
And today, the defensive staff starting to fill out with defensive coordinator Alan Williams. Tom, so much familiarity with the system, going back to 2001, entering the league with Tampa Bay, and at that time, Tony Dungy, Lovie Smith. So it's a disciple of this. He's been coaching for 30 years. He's been a defensive coordinator before, and he'll be calling the plays.
Right, and I mean, it's extreme trust. Whenever Matt Eberflus is going to bring these guys along, and especially the guys in the coordinator positions, you have to have trust, because when you go from a coordinator and you have a lot of responsibilities on your desk, and what you do in the game, how you get them prepared in practice, and what the reflection of how they play is directly placed upon you. Now you're handing that over. That baton is going to another group of guys that you're expecting from what was expected out of you out of defensive coordinator. Now what do you expect out of your new defensive coordinator? What do you expect the process of your offensive coordinator to going to be? And just like all the other position coaches. So now that Matt is in the position where he's the head coach, he's making a lot more decisions on all three sides of the ball when you think about, what he's going to try to do here with the Bears organization and how he's going to turn these guys into division champs.
Linebacker coach will be Dave Borgonzi. He's had a great deal of experience as well-regarded. His work with Darius Leonard there in Indianapolis, a significant piece to this puzzle. And he was also with him with the Dallas Cowboys. And then the offensive line coach. I was waiting for my phone to ring today. Didn't hear it. You were busy shoveling snow today. Offensive line coach is Chris Morgan, coming over from the Steelers, where he was assistant offensive line coach. Then when Adrian Clem left for Oregon, he became the offensive line coach by himself for the final 3 games of the season. They won games. They went to the playoffs. But his bigger resume is with the Atlanta Falcons, Tom. So that outside zone under Kyle Shanahan, the offensive coordinator, when they go to the Super Bowl in 2016. And that was enormously successful there, and he was the run game coordinator there as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's got plenty of experience. You talk about these guys with double-digit years of service in the NFL, and then when you're the head offensive line coach, and then all of a sudden you go to a different team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, and one of the Pittsburgh Steelers' foundations of success over the years has been their defensive style of play and their offense and their offensive running game. And when you look at what the Pittsburgh Steelers had on the offensive line, he was trying to get rookies ready to play at the center position. You're trying to, take injuries and COVID into account. So I think all the experiences that some of these assistant coaches have gone through in the last couple of years are not only building blocks for the future, but it also understands how do you coach under some of the worst circumstances, and how do you persevere through all these trying times that we've gone through in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about what is their ability to develop players, and that's really the key. Teaching them is one thing, developing is another, and I think a Luke Getsy coming in as offensive coordinator coming here, and that will be an interesting situation with a young guy. We'll hear from Joe Moorhead, a coach of his back in the day at the University of Akron, where Coach Moorhead is at right now. Obviously, a lot of great things to say about this former quarterback. And you're hearing things out of Green Bay from Aaron Jones on what the Bears are getting, and they believe they're getting somebody special.
Hey, when Dick Stanfield was our offensive line coach, you could take so much into account of what he was teaching you because he was a former offensive lineman, just like Luke here. If I'm a quarterback, I want to hear from a former quarterback. I want to hear from a guy that stood behind center and shotgun or directly behind center and made decisions according to the information that was given to him with the coverages and the defensive front. So when you look at a guy, Justin Fields, and where his ability can take this football team and take him individually, I like that message being delivered by a former quarterback.
And there's a report from NFL Media's Ian Rappaport. The Bears may be close to hiring former Giants receivers coach Tyke Tolbert. He's been around a long time, Tom. Been with 5 different NFL teams since 2003 and a very respected assistant. That's not done yet, not official, but that's somebody to keep an eye on as well. And coming up next, we'll be joined by Big Jim Miller. Tom, we'll get the show going. Our weekly guest here on Bears All Access with our producer today, Brandon Fryer. I'm Jeff Joniak. That's Tom Thayer. I want to be Tom Thayer one day.
Right.
Thanks as well to Dan Barilli and Jordan Tredup. This is Chicago Sports Radio, 670 The Score. Welcome back to Bears All Access. We're brought to you by IGS Energy. Choose clean energy for your home at IGS.com because every good choice adds up to a better world. With Tom Thayer, Jeff Joniak in this week's edition of Bears All Access. Pleased to be joined by our special guest each week. He's from SiriusXM's NFL Radio, the former Bears quarterback, Jim Miller, joining the program from Mobile, Alabama. I had an umbrella today down there, Big Jim.
Yeah, the faucet was definitely open. It was often on and off rain all day. So for both the American club and the National club, and it's something you get to scout, though. Can the guys play in the elements? There were some bad footballs thrown today. There were a lot of drop balls today by the receivers because the ball got a little slick, and then everybody's getting the good intel that they need in inclement weather down here in Mobile.
Yeah, with the New York Jets and Detroit Lions are running the show for their respective squads. So we'll talk about some of that in detail coming up here later in the show, Jim. But Tom and I were just talking about the assistants that have brought in. Get your overall reaction on what you heard from Matt Eberflus, the new head coach of the Bears, and Ryan Poles, the new general manager, early in the week.
Yeah, well, like anything, it's important. You got to get this staff in place, and because again, these are the guys that are going to be delivering the message, and Coach Eberflus, he's been in the NFL for a long time. He's acquiring the guys that he wants, that he believes will deliver that message, and they have to have the buy-in from him too, right? So these guys have to be the ones to sell it. So I was actually down here. I talked to a Bears analyst, Tom Herman. So I talked to him quite a bit today as he's getting to know this new staff as well. So, pretty exciting times. And again, there's still 5 teams that, don't even have a head coach right now. So this is big when you're able to acquire guys right now and add them to your staff before the cupboard is bare, so to speak. Because, you look at the Raiders in Jacksonville, they've been the longest without their head coaches, and they still don't even Raiders just got theirs in Josh McDaniels. But you look at Jacksonville, they're still searching right now. So this is a good thing that Eberflus is really getting this all done pretty quickly.
And 2 coordinators are locked up. Luke Getsy, they get him from Green Bay. Alan Williams, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for Luke, he had a couple offers. Obviously, he went out there and interviewed for the Denver Broncos. Comes with great resources and bringing along Aaron Rodgers. I think we know how terrific he is. And then the other guys certainly know the system of Eberflus. When you look at Alan Williams there for the Colts, and I believe you just mentioned that the linebackers coach is added as well. So that system, they're going to get up and running pretty quickly, I would think, defensively from that standpoint. So, yeah, I like the guys that they've hired so far.
Okay, Tom Thayer, Jim Miller here on Bears All Access. We'll break it down over the course of the evening on just what this means for the Bears here in 2022, how they hit the ground running. So, boys, Tom, we'll start with you. We go to a 4-3 defense. That'll be the base defense anyway. We know Nichols played significantly in this league. So how does this begin to affect certain players that may be on this roster? Some guys may not be because of a switch to a 4-3, but I think of a guy like Roquan Smith playing that inside linebacker all by himself there and a true middle linebacker in this 4-3. Is that an assumption, or can he play outside in this 4-3?
Okay, Jim, I got to ask a question with a question because I just want to clarify things. Jim, when you're down there at the Senior Bowl, do they play a 4-3 defense, or do they play a 34 defense, or do they play a scheme according to the head coaches there?
No, it'll be a 4-3 defense is what it was. There was discussion to have one be a 3-4 and one be a 4-3, but that kind of fell through, and so they strictly go through a 4-3 defense down here.
Okay, so now you get a chance to evaluate some players that could be key components to your football team going forward. But when I look at the Bears personnel, and because of Jeff, and Jim, these defenses morph to every defensive front that you could possibly face during the course of a game, let alone a season. So is there a position that I don't think Roquan Smith would be comfortable with? No. It's just that when you go from a 3-4 defense and you're always standing above an offensive lineman and you're unprotected, so that offensive lineman you're his responsibility. He can fight directly at you, fire off the ball. But now when you're Roquan Smith and you put him in the middle of a defense and you have defensive tackles that are there to protect you, allow you to run with a little bit of freedom, I think that even exposes you to more opportunities in that type of defense played, and we've seen it throughout the history of the Chicago Bears. I think the key is, are the Robert Quinns and the Khalil Macks, do they have the ability to fit into this defensive style, and can they do what's required of you in those positions? But a guy like Roquan Smith, I think this is the type of guy that has the talent that could play with intelligence, with the physicality, with the athleticism that he's gifted with, and could be an asset in any defense you want to put him in.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to affect guys that you mentioned in terms of the two outside backers, or even Trevis Gibson, right? He was a defensive end in college. Now has learned to be a stand-up backer. Now will he go back to defensive end would be the question I have. For Roquan, is it middle backer? Yeah, I think he's got the speed of say, Darius Leonard, and he's going to be a tackling machine, whether he's at Mike or Will. Or do they move him to, say, the Lance Briggs weak side linebacker position because he's a run and hit guy. He's a heat-seeking missile. So I think all those will be determined, but clearly some players will be affected in how they're going to be utilized. Typically, when you look at this style of defense, I go back to even Robert Mathis when everybody thought he was too young or too small to play defensive end. That's the style of defense that the Bears are going to be utilizing now. So this is a Colts defense. You better have on your track shoes, is what I believe Coach Eberflus said, and there will be no loafing. Let's just put it that way. There will be no loafing. This is going to be a legit, speedy defense that he's going to be installing.
How about, Jim, how does this affect a guy like Eddie Jackson?
No, I think, they're still going to rock and roll the safeties from that standpoint. So I think Eddie will be a player that fits right in from that standpoint. Most teams do it around the NFL because coverage is coverage from that standpoint. But, you got to be able to, like I said, fly to the football and, make legitimate. That's one thing that the Colts have done. They've gotten a lot of turnovers over the past couple of years. And so that's what the Bears want to get back to. We go back to, 2018 when they had 34, and it hasn't really happened from that standpoint. Eddie Jackson has to get more turnovers from that standpoint. That's really where they want the impact to be in the secondary.
You got to think, past guys that we've seen over their career, of a Mike Brown or a Tony Parrish and these types of guys. I think there's a certain element of a physical style play that when you talk about two safeties in this four-man front, They got to be able, like Jim says, roll, frontward and backward during the course of a cadence, but they also have to be physical when they approach the line of scrimmage. They got to be physical in the defensive backfield, and they also have to be good readers on what's going up in front of them if they're going to kind of recapture the turnovers that the Bears used to be able to produce.
I think Chris Harris too, who went by the nickname of Hitman. Hitman was a vital part of that as well. And then I think about Lovey always talking about Jim and Tom about Tommy Harris and the three-technique defensive tackle being the engine of the defense. So who would that engine be on the current roster?
Bilal Nichols. He's a type of guy that has versatility on the inside. He can play out of a right or left-handed stance. He can slide over from the left guard to the right guard with equal balance. He knows how to play on the interior. He has the experience of playing on the interior when Eddie Goldman opted out 2 years ago. So I think if you have to plug a guy immediately in place, they do have a guy that can fulfill that role. However, that's a unique position. You're looking of traits of explosiveness at the line of scrimmage and at the snap of the ball that sometimes offensive linemen have a hard time catching up to.
Big Jim?
It's going to affect, I think, Eddie Goldman. I think he's a big run-stuffing defensive tackle. Not that you still don't want the girth. I do believe that Eberflus is going to want the girth, but I'm with Tom. I think now you're looking for a penetrator. Now you're looking for a guy like a Javon Hargrave type of player, an Aaron Donald type of player, a three-technique that is a penetrator that can really, get through, slice through those gaps and really be disruptive from that standpoint. And who knows, may not be on the roster right now, and that's why we're down here in Mobile, and we'll see what opens up in free agency that potentially could be added to the mix.
All right, let's take a listen for a sit-down interview I did with General Manager Ryan Poles this week up at Hallis Hall.
Starting in New York playing high school football and then going to Boston College, having a good career. And then the best thing is, the opportunity that I got was here in Chicago with the Bears. And it's just really cool to see how that went full circle to be back here as a general manager.
What resonated with you, the process with Chairman of the Board, George McCaskey, and his group?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say, first impressions are important to me. And the fact that George went to the airport and picked me up at baggage claim, I thought that was special. And I truly value people and relationships. And when that happened, and for him to spend extra time with me in the car to get to know me on a deeper level, I knew everything I needed to know before I even walked in the building. So it's been really good to get to know George.
Well, your exposure to the Bears as a rookie is significant also because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Virginia McCaskey speaks to the rookies every year.
Yeah.
So in 2008, you were in that room when you heard from Virginia McCaskey. So you already had a pretty good knowledge of what it means to her and to their family. Do you remember that moment back in 2008?
I do. I remember how much pride she had about the Chicago Bears. And I remember a lot of the stories just in terms of how deep-rooted the history is here. The other thing that wasn't brought up is we went to the Hall of Fame with Gal Sayers, actually.
Oh, okay.
And to hear him speak as well was just a really cool moment.
Yeah, there's this place dripping with history.
Yes,
there's no question about
it.
And you think about all these big names. Was this always something that you wanted to do, personnel management in football? Because if not football, was this going to be the path for you, or was this just something that just came about?
Yeah. No, when I walked in as a scouting assistant back in 2009, once I got my feet underneath me and I started to understand the scope of really how the front office works and how building a team works, I wanted to be a general manager and put my hands on an organization and lead them to a championship.
Do you have a mission statement for this team? Because you're used to winning.
Yeah.
I mean, you won a lot in Kansas City.
Yeah. My mission statement, really to get this thing kicked off, is to take over the North and never give it back.
Simple as that.
Simple.
Hard to do. Simple as that.
Exactly.
That's a great goal.
There's a lot of work to do.
What's your philosophy on drafting?
For the draft philosophy, it's really to understand how to tie evaluation with valuation. When and where to pick certain players on the board and have that feel is important to me. I believe in building the foundation with offensive linemen and defensive linemen, and obviously supporting our quarterback with giving him the most weapons that we can possible.
Spoken like a true offensive lineman.
Exactly.
Right there, digging in the trenches. Do you value growing your own, say, versus free agency?
Yeah, homegrown talent, that is critical to have long-term success. And I think that's important. There's shortcuts at every turn in building a roster, so it takes discipline to do it the right way. And if you do it the right way and you keep those homegrown talented players that you have drafted and sign them to second contracts once they've deserved them, then you're cooking.
What kind of team you want to see?
Yeah, I want to see a tough, violent, and fast team.
Putting it in perspective.
Yeah.
Very quick. I like it. Skill sets and traits aside, what type of person will be a Bear moving forward?
You know, it's critical. We're going to, in the draft room, we're going to label players with a Bear logo that have toughness and passion for the game. I've found through history, if you have those two things plus the skill set, you're going to go far, you're going to make the team, and also you're going to affect the culture.
All right, tell me about Matt Eberflus. And is there a relationship from the past that we may not be aware of?
Yeah, so the big thing is I had a criteria of what the head coach needed to look like and what characteristics he needed to have. And the moment that Matt walked into the room, he was able to check all of those boxes. He was passionate about the game. He was a leader. He could motivate the team. He valued players more than anything. He wants to put players in a position to succeed as much as possible. And then the biggest thing is just having a detailed plan. Matt had a detailed plan that had multiple layers to it. And that's what got me excited, and I was convicted that he was the right person.
Did you guys know each other before?
We had bumped into each other before. Obviously, when you watch other teams and you get a feel for what units are playing really well, that's a reflection of who you are. So I made sure that I was able to mate him in the past. I think it was like a year ago we got a chance to bump into each other. So there was a little bit of history there, and I'm excited to work with him.
Sounds like they're hitting the ground running, too, from everything we hear up there and at the Senior Bowl as well. I'll start with Tom, just on your overall reaction. Some of that we heard in the news conference as well. That was before the news conference.
It's just amazing at 2008 when this journey began and where it is at this point in his young life. I hope all the success that he can possibly have, because I think it's the first time in a long time that we've heard the foundation is the offense and defensive line. And it is, and again, I always sound like a broken record, but it's the truth of the matter. If you do want to have a violent, physical, fast football team, your speed comes from the effectiveness of your offense and defensive line. If Roquan Smith is going to run well as a middle linebacker or a will linebacker, it's because he's getting protected by big defensive linemen up front. And I have generations of watching historic Hall of Fame defensive linemen protect and help a guy like Mike Singletary have the type of career he has. If you want to be fast on offense, if you want to have explosiveness, you got to be able to block up front. You have to have the reputation of being a physical offensive lineman that kind of sells the program to the rest of your offensive players. So when I hear a young guy like Ryan Poles talk for the first time to you, again, the journey from 2008 to where we're at, but also the influence how the offense and defensive line has to have on the overall success of this organization.
Jim?
Like you said, you want the team to represent. If he's talking about a fast, physical team, we always talk about it, say, the Baltimore Ravens. They have a saying, right? We play the Raven way or the Patriot way. So the Bears want to have that identity. So in order to identify that type of talent of what you're trying to represent, to be able to cultivate and develop that talent, whether it's in drafting, whether it's in free agency, and what those players represent, and how they play. So there has to be an identity or an identifier that those players fit what the Bears are trying to do and take pride from that standpoint in how they're doing it and what they're going to represent. I laugh even at the Raiders when Mike Mayock, who's no longer there as a general manager, when they were down here at the Reese's Senior Bowl coaching it, they would put stickers, a Raiders sticker, on players that they identified they wanted the Raiders to represent. So you'd get a Raiders sticker if you made a quote-unquote a Raider play, and that's the type of player that you want. If you're going to wear their colors, you need to represent in your style of play and how you identify with how they wanted to play. And that's what I think the Bears and obviously Ryan Poles, that's what he wants to identify, and that's what he's going to go after.
Tom and Jim both will get Bears stickers, no question about it. We'll talk with Matt Eberflus coming up next, my interview with him. This is Bears All Access on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. This segment of Bears All Access is brought to you by Athletico Physical Therapy. Visit athletico.com to request an appointment in clinic or virtually and start feeling better tomorrow. Jeff Joniak, Tom Thayer, Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio's Moving the Chains. He's in Mobile, Alabama. We'll talk to him about Senior Bowl practices in just a bit, but we'll continue our conversations with the new regime, and this includes Matt Eberflus, the head coach and former defensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts. All right, so you pull up to Hallis Hall the first time, and you see the big C out, but you see George Hallis.
Yeah.
Okay, you're doing what he did.
Right.
How does that resonate with you?
It's really surreal when you think about it. You know, a legendary coach like George, and unbelievable the records that he has accomplished in the championships, and to uphold the standards, okay, and the habits of victory that he had. And I'm up for that challenge and excited to get to work with that.
What moment in your career, or even playing, did you think, you know what, I am going to be a head coach? And then when you felt you were ready to be a head coach?
Yeah, I've always said this, that, I became a defensive coordinator at 29 in the Big 12. I was the youngest coordinator in the country. And you get put into that position and you just go. You just put your head down and work, one action at a time, just one action at a time. Now, you're talking now I'm 51 with more experience, so I've been, waiting for this opportunity. Obviously, I have a plan in place to accomplish what we need to accomplish, but it comes back to the same thing. It's one action at a time, making wise decisions, one action at a time of what we're going to see on the football field. And that's what matters.
Why was this an attractive job?
Just the tradition, the historic franchise of the Chicago Bears. When you go through it, and sure, I might have had a couple of choices here and there at the very end of it, and I chose this place because of the men and the franchise. George McCaskey, Ryan Poles, and those are the guys you want to be in the foxhole with, because you're going to have adversity, you're going to have victories. Who do you want to be in with? Who do you want to be with in those moments? And those are the guys that I chose.
What's job one in terms of what you address roster-wise? Yeah,
roster-wise, just to evaluate and see where we are, because, we're making the shift from a 3-4 to a 4-3. That's one, evaluate our offensive line. That's number two, where's our receivers, quarterback, everybody really, and just to evaluate it and see where we are. And then you know where you are, now you can know where you're going. So that's most important.
What do you want players to know about you?
That what they're about to get into is going to be the hardest thing they're ever going to do, but it's going to be worth it.
Why will it be so hard?
Because the work patterns that we're going to have on a day-to-day basis when we get onto the football field, and the preparation leading up to that, is something they've never done before. And it's going to be the hardest thing. And I always tell them that. I say, it's 1 year. I said, when I come back to you after 1 year, I want you to say, what I said to you, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, was it true? And every player that I've ever said it to says, Coach, you weren't lying. It was true.
Well, it's also, in many respects, if you're not willing to do it, you won't be a part of it. So those that do stay and enjoy the process and find out that you have their best interest at heart, you want to put them in the best position to succeed, and that's all part of it. Does that come back to you as well?
Yeah, no doubt. This is a partnership. You're working with NFL players, so it's all about the players. So to me, it's a partnership. So how can the coach serve the players? So me as the head football coach, serve the whole football team, coach the coaches, and then how can each position coach really serve the guy he's working with? It's truly a partnership to be able to get to where we want to get.
Well, Jim, I hear that, and when the hardest thing you're ever going to do when I hear that about a football player, because a lot of these guys, wherever they came from, around the country, parts unknown, from their high school level to their college days to the NFL, have their own definition of what's the hardest thing to do. But when you heard that, did it jog something in your memory of your hardest thing you ever had to do to get on a team?
Well, again, yeah, the buy-in factor, I think it needs to be there. I'll never forget when Dick Duran became the head coach of the Bears, and I remember there's very few coaches ever say this. If Dick Duran says, hey, we chose everybody in this room, like when he has his mission statement meeting and we're all in the auditorium and we're about to, we get done with our last, mini camp, and he said, hey, everybody in this room is here for a reason. We chose you to be here and represent the Chicago Bears. If anybody in this room doesn't want to be here, Just come to me, and I will find a home for you somewhere else. Because that coach needs to know that you're all in. And it is the hardest thing that you're ever going to do. But you've got to be all in from that standpoint, right? Why did Tom Brady just retire? He said, I couldn't be all in anymore. You can't be half in, can't be a quarter of the way in. You've got to be all in order to make that commitment. And that's what I think Coach Eberflus is really talking about there.
Back in the old days when training camps used to be as hard as they could possibly be and there was a new coach coming on board, everybody dreaded it because they knew they were about to go through the most physical, exhaustive training camps maybe of their career if you don't go through multiple coaching changes. But when you look at Matt Eberflus coming in here, the one thing that's going to make it so hard is because you're digesting new information. Not only do you have to play it at a speed that they're expecting an NFL caliber player to play at, you're also trying to dissect new information and learn it so you can use it efficiently. And then there's going to be guys that are going to have position changes. And that's as difficult as you can possibly try to, perform at the level they expect, change positions, maybe balance in different things. And then it's their coaches, they got to weed out the guys that are the non-competitors. And there's a lot of factors that come into play when Matt Eberflus says this is going to be the most difficult challenge of their lives. And it is going to be. But I think that's the process that every one of these guys have to try to put into place is figure out the guys that you can count on in a weekly basis that are going to give the effort that's expected from you when you talk about these loafs and stuff. Because the worst thing you want to do, Jeff, is go into a meeting after a game and they said, oh, so-and-so, you had 5 loafs. So-and-so, you had – that's humbling and embarrassing in front of your teammates. So when you are called out for those types of things, it's going to challenge at what level that you can play, perform, and practice at.
We often say that the game has changed. The people have changed in the game, both the coaches and the players, and how they've been raised, so to speak. In the college game, the rules changes, the minimization of padded practices, the time between practices changing, lack of double days and all that. Jim, do you think that a guy like Matt, who's he's 51, but as he said, he's been coaching his whole life. He's played. He was a walk-on at Toledo and had to earn his way to get onto that roster. And it seemed like coaching was in his future, no matter where it was going to be. And he's risen through the ranks in that fashion. Can you make those statements the same way with today's guys?
Yeah, I just think things are in reverse. Things used to trickle down. Like, I always bring up the example when I was at Michigan State, George Perlis was the coach there, right? He was the defensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We did everything like the Steelers did, from how we practiced to how our uniforms were made, even the Block S, right? Because Pittsburgh only had it on one side of their helmet in terms of their sticker. So we did everything like them. Now it's almost reversed. There is a trickle-up effect, right? Look at the influence of the college game on the NFL game, and college coaches would even say that about the high school level now and how players come out of high school because they're all running wide-open offenses and how that trickles up to college. So it's just somewhat in reverse is what I'd say what's happening now, the trend in the NFL.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll talk Justin Fields and how the Bears offense will look with new coordinator Luke Getsy, head coach Matt Eberflus, and his staff. It's all ahead here on Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy on Chicago Sports Radio, 670 The Score. This segment of Bears All Access is brought to you by CDW. People who get it. Jeff Joniak, Tom Thayer, Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio. ESPN's Adam Schefter reporting, fellas, that Jim Harbaugh is telling University of Michigan he will stay there for as long as they want him, Jim.
Well, that's a good thing. I think everybody was a little bit nervous because Adolfo Mensa, the general manager, spent some time in San Francisco and was there when Jim Harbaugh was there. So I wonder if Jim Harbaugh got his raise back. Right? He had to take a pay cut to stay there, so maybe that was a part of the deal for Jim Harbaugh. You just wonder if that's the case. That's stuff that always happens behind closed doors, I think. So
I got to tell you, him getting his money back, if that was the reason why he went back to Michigan, then I I don't respect that very much because Jim has made such an abundance of money. The little bit he's going to make up if Michigan decided to, hey, let's give you back what you know that was taken away from you. I think you got to do a service to the kids that you're out there recruiting. If you're sitting out there recruiting all these kids and telling all these parents what a model citizen you are and what you're going to bring their kids to Michigan to be, aboard, and then you go out there and you say, okay, Minnesota, dangle a carrot in front of me so I can go out there and test the waters in there. I think that
well, he made no bones about it. He was telling recruits he was actively trying to get back in the NFL. So it's not like he was hiding it from that standpoint. But like you said, I don't think it sits well with a lot of parents out there. But, I think he was pretty open about it, that he was interested in returning.
But to me, I think that affects the parents and the kids that you're out there recruiting. So if it's not going to happen this year, what's telling me that it's not going to happen in a year when somebody out there goes and makes such Jim Harbaugh, all right, instead of you having use of a private plane, we'll give you a private plane.
Well, he did say he told Michigan that, you're here as long as you want me. So he did say that. So we'll see what happens. That's according to reports anyway.
Right.
All right. Joe Moorhead is the head coach at Akron. He was once at Penn State as a coordinator, and had a chance to visit with him about Luke Getsy because he was Luke Getsy's college coach.
Yeah, I've known Luke for a long time since he was a player at Steer Valley High School in Pittsburgh. Through his time as a player at Pitt, and then came to play for us at Akron, and then started his coaching career here as a graduate assistant. Tremendous success in the NFL, a couple different stops, and then with us at Mississippi State. So very well-earned opportunity, and I know Luke will do a great job.
What's he like as a coach?
Very cerebral, always well-prepared, a great communicator, expert of fundamentals and technique, and a guy who understands offensive football, protections, run game, route concepts at an incredibly high level.
Did you see Coach in him as a player?
I did, and Luke was a fringe NFL guy. Got into camp with the Niners, and I think that was the extent of his experience. But it didn't take long to identify that if he wasn't playing, he would be involved in the sport in some capacity. And certainly coaching was in his future at some point.
It used to be that a guy your age would be considered a young coach in your 40s, and I would look at 60s and 50-year-old coaches as the standard. But now a bunch of 30-somethings are really starting to make an impact. Obviously, you look at the Super Bowl and you can see that right there. What do you think of that as a coach? That these younger coaches have really started to make the rise into top positions in the National Football League and in college football?
Yeah, I mean it's great for those guys to get their opportunity and take advantage of it. Certainly at 48, I'm a literal graybeard, not a figurative graybeard. So us old timers still have probably a little gas left in the tank. But yeah, I mean that's just the the nature of the game and the nature of the profession. That guys are getting into organizations maybe in a quality control or a graduate assistant capacity. They're paying their dues, they're getting their opportunities, and they're doing a great job with them. And you just see a bunch, as you mentioned, I think it is a bit of a trend. Guys in their 30s, rising to prominent roles within NFL organizations.
What will you tell us about his personality as a coach, and then what was his personality like as a player? Are they one and the same?
He is incredibly competitive, possesses a ton of confidence, but he's very composed. So when you get to know Luke and you meet him for the first time, you think maybe he's a little quiet, a little reticent, very analytical. But when it comes to the preparation part of it and the game part of it, you're not going to find a more competitive guy out there.
Joey's going to be leaving Aaron Rodgers, our nemesis, for a rookie quarterback who obviously has great potential in Justin Fields. Such a different contrast here. As an offensive-minded coach like Luke, how do you analyze that as a head coach yourself?
Yeah, I mean, Justin was committed to be at Penn State for almost a year, and I think my anticipated departure at Penn State, led to his decommitment eventually to Georgia, then going to Ohio State. But Justin is, and his family, and I've texted with Justin and his dad, since Luke got hired, just great people. Justin incredibly talented, could beat you with his brain, his arms, and his legs. And at the end of the day, whether it's college or NFL football, it's a personnel-driven game. And Luke will do an excellent job identifying what the Bears have, what those guys can do well, and then formulating a scheme around them. And certainly, Justin's the straw that stirs the drink.
So it'd be easy for critics to say, well, did Aaron Rodgers really need any coaching when you think about it, right, given his excellence? But we know that's not true. We know that coaches coach and players play, and there is learning going on here. Do you think he will draw a lot from that experience of just the daily routine of a great quarterback or a great superstar athlete, regardless of sport, that Justin could learn a lot from Luke?
Yeah, I mean, most critics don't know whether the ball's inflated or stuffed with feathers, so I would take everything they say with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, anytime that you're able to be around a guy like Aaron Rodgers, and one of the all-time best to do it, and see his habits and how he prepares and the things he does on game day to be an incredibly high-level guy, you'd be remiss to not carry over some of those experiences, to your first coordinator opportunity in the NFL. And I know Luke will do that. Like I said, incredibly smart. I've been around a lot of great coaches with different and diverse philosophies, and he'll put together a great package. And I think Justin will be the primary beneficiary of that. We were at Penn State. We were his second major college offer. So we had identified him very early in the process. We got him up to camp, got him offered. And then when he started, he actually didn't play a ton as an underclassman. But then when he started to get a bunch of great film, he blew up, became a 5-star guy, the Elite 11, and one of the top players, if not the top player in the country. But getting to know Pablo and Gina and his parents, and great family. Sister plays softball at Georgia. They are just, you take the football part out of it. Justin Fields and his family are just top flight, high character, awesome people. And to get to know them, and even though it didn't work out, I didn't have the opportunity to coach him, I've stayed in touch with them, and you're just always happy for Justin's success.
Joe Moorhead, head coach at Akron. So this begs the question then, Tom and Jim, do you build a system around Justin, or you plug Justin into a system?
Jim, you go first with the quarterback.
I think you build a system around Justin is what you do. You take the stuff that he did at Ohio State, almost like what Carolina did with Cam Newton, right? There was a lockout year, and they brought in the Auburn offense to really get him to feel comfortable when you look at Cam Newton. And I think that's what you're going to do. You're going to build around the strengths of Justin Fields. So, it's from the offensive line and what they want to do running, how they're going to be mobile with him and take advantage of his legs, throwing on the run, all those type of things. So they're going to build a system that suits his skill sets and what accentuates his positives and minimizes any struggles that he has in other areas of his game.
Well, you look at what the Buffalo Bills has done the last couple of years, building a system around Josh Allen and his traits. I think that's kind of the template of success that you kind of want to formulate a plan like that. But when you talk about Luke in being with Aaron Rodgers, I would, as a coach, I would try to absorb everything I possibly could in Aaron's preparation. And then how does that transfer to Justin? And you're not going to say, hey, be like him, be like him. Hey, this is the way that we saw this play. This is the way that we broke down this type of formation. This is the opportunity that we presented to our quarterback. In all those types of things that he was be able to learn from Aaron, it may have been a player teaching a coach more than a coach was teaching a player.
That's Tom Thayer, Jim Miller, Jeff Joniak. We'll look at today's Senior Bowl activities with Big Jim after this break on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. Final segment here on Bears All Access with Tom Thayer, Jeff Joniak, and Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio is moving the changes down to Mobile, Alabama at the Reese's Senior Bowl. What are you learning? Specifically at quarterback, because we keep hearing that Malik Willis is showing everybody that he's got a rocket arm. The kid out of Atlanta, Georgia, can also move, but he's coming from a school like Liberty. So how's he panning out with the other top talent from around the country?
Yeah, he really had a good day today. He separated himself for the American squad. He could spin it. I thought all the other quarterbacks somewhat struggled throwing in the rain today from Kenny Pickett. I do like Desmond Ridder. I think he is really impressed from Cincinnati as well. He was spinning the ball really well also, and they've got Carson Strong from Nevada who's got a real strong arm. But Ridder from Cincinnati and Malik Willis, he's a really good athlete, made a couple nice scrambles today, can throw on the run but I thought he had a tremendous day this afternoon. And Western Kentucky's Bailey Zappi, he basically transferred up to Western Kentucky, brought all his receivers with him, put up a lot of yardage in production, but I thought Malik really stole the show today.
Jim, is there any, small school guys out there that are going to turn heads of some scouts and some developers out there? You think of the offensive guard that ended up starting for the Denver Broncos from the small school in Wisconsin last year? Yes.
Yeah, Quinn Miners.
Is there any of those guys out there that, when you think about the Bears and where they're positioned in the draft, that, you can get a starter in every one of those draft choices position? Is there a guy right now that's catching your eye?
I like the cornerback from Fayetteville State. All right, he's 6'2.5", 193 pounds, Joshua Williams. So I think he clocked the fastest yesterday. They do the next-gen stats. I think he was at 21.5 miles an hour. But this is a very long corner who can put some weight on, and he can still fly. So Fayetteville State has got my vote right now. He really has looked good.
And on the defensive side of the ball, Florida State's edge Jermaine Johnson. He has been singled out. Jim, what have you heard about his play so far?
Yeah, I think for him, I think there's a couple of big guys that have played pretty well but he's got the speed from that standpoint. The defensive end for Florida State, he's physical, fast, and speed to power, I think is what I wrote next to him, where he's really excelled down here in Mobile so far.
And, Tom, I got to get you the clip I saw of Penn State's Jesse Lucetta, because we talk about leverage all the time, all right? So he was up against, at right tackle, the 6'8", 387-pounder from Minnesota, Daniel Faalele, and who do you think won that battle? It was something. The kid from Penn State. Jim, did you see that play?
I saw it, and he bull rushed him and pushed him back. He fell flat on his fanny when you look at Daniel from Minnesota. That dude is a big dude. Really
right.
big dude.
But
Probably
leverage, Tom. Leverage.
Yeah.
I mean, leverage. Go ahead, Jim.
Tom will love it because the best guy down here, in my opinion, on the O-line is the kid from Boston College. That Zion Johnson is an absolute beast, man. 314 pounds. That dude just doesn't move. He anchors, Tom. He is impressive. Very impressive.
That's what you got to have. You have to have an anchor. When you talk about the size of the Minnesota guy, if you're kind of loose on your feet and you take all that big size and just get it pushed backwards, no, but I like the development possibilities of the Minnesota guy. You said 6'8.5", 380 pounds. Huge, huge man.
And you'd also like the fact that BC's Zion Johnson stayed after in the rain because he was getting snaps at center and he was practicing in the rain his snaps at center. So that's a guy who wants it badly. That's going to wrap us up. Big Jim, have a great call of the game on Saturday, and we will talk to you next week.
Sounds good, guys. Good to be with you.
That's Jim Miller, Tom Thayer. Thanks to our producer tonight here at The Score, Brandon Fryer, Jordan Tredup, and Dan Barilli. I'm Jeff Joniak. This has been a Bears All Access on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. Good night.
Thanks for listening to this Chicago Bears Network presentation of Bears All Access. Podcasts are available on chicagobears.com and on iTunes, or download the official Bears mobile app. Bears All Access has been brought to you by IGS Energy and sponsored by Miller Lite.